What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the very first Ask Me Anything episode of the brand new NHL season. I want to apologize for the lack of uploads over the past week, 2 weeks. I've kind of just been relaxing, gearing up for the season, and then enjoying the first couple of days, but I'm definitely ready to get the videos going for this season. I plan on doing these Ask Me Anythings every single Monday. You guys asked a ton of fantastic questions this episode, so I want to give a huge shout out to every single one of you who took the time to come up with a question and leave it on the post. Even the ones that don't get featured in the video, just know I read them all. I appreciate all of you guys. It's overreaction season, obviously, with the sample size for every team being so small, so there's going to be a lot of that in this video. But with all that being said, let's go ahead and get started. The first question we have comes from Raphael, who says, is it time to send Slavinsky and Wright to the minors, or should they at least finish the 9-game trials? These are really two totally different situations. Obviously, the one thing they have in common is they're both top picks from this most recent NHL draft. We'll talk about Shane Wright's case first. So Shane Wright isn't actually eligible to play in the American Hockey League this season. If he is sent down, it'll be back to the Canadian Hockey League, and honestly, I feel like that's the only right way to go here for the Seattle Kraken. I think it makes sense that they wanted to keep him on the roster out of training camp and out of preseason just to get a glimpse of him, maybe get his 9-game stint in the NHL, but at this point, I don't even think you keep him up for the 9 games. I think they should send him down as soon as possible. With a player like Shane Wright, I feel like you want him to get as many reps as possible, no matter which level it's at. The one game he played in the NHL so far for Seattle, he played like 6 minutes. I don't really see any point in that. I don't think it's good for his development. The other 2 games, he was sitting in the press box as a healthy scratch. Obviously, he's still practicing with the team. I'm sure he's learning things, picking things up just by sitting in the press box and watching, but ultimately, in the end, you want this guy playing games. You want him up to game speed, so I think sooner rather than later, it's probably a good idea to send him back down to the CHL. And in the case of Slavinsky, he's played all 3 games for Montreal so far, spent most of his ice time playing in the top 9. Hasn't really been all that noticeable. There's been a couple of times where he'll get loose for a chance. Hasn't been able to finish, though. Still is pointless. I think in the end, it would be best if they send him down to the American Hockey League, because obviously with Slavinsky, he doesn't have to go play in junior. He doesn't have to go play overseas. He just goes down to the AHL in a league where I think he'll actually be able to dominate, put up big numbers, get confidence, get really adjusted to playing that North American style. But with Slavinsky, I honestly think at this point, Montreal might as well keep him up for the 9 games and then send him down before burning a year of his ELC. So that's kind of what I think is going to happen there. Moving on now to the next question. This one comes from Broads, who says, Fleury has had a really rough start to the season. Do you see him bouncing back, or is Father Time catching up to him? So yeah, Marc-Andre Fleury and the Minnesota Wild have gotten absolutely lit up so far to start the season. Fleury is currently rocking an .837 goals against average in his 2 starts. I think his goals saved above expected is currently sitting around like a -6 or something like that already, which is just extraordinarily bad. Obviously, Marc-Andre Fleury isn't going to be this bad all season, but he is 37. Father Time certainly could be catching up to him, and goaltending is just so hard to predict in the NHL. In the end, I do think the Minnesota Wild and Marc-Andre Fleury are going to be fine. I think he should be able to give them good enough goaltending as to where this is at least still a playoff team. I wouldn't be panicking yet if I was a Wild fan, but it certainly has been a really, really rough start to the season for Fleury and the team. 7 goals against in each of their first 2 games. Talk about starting off on the wrong foot. They got some work to do for sure. I'm sure most of you heard the soundbite of Matt Zuccarello in the post-game interview after Game 2 saying the Wild defend like an effing junior team, which is quite a bold statement there, so obviously everyone in that room knows they need to be better. The next question we have comes from Jack Hanley, who says, which newcomer are you most impressed with for the Red Wings thus far? Ville Husso, Dominic Kubalik, Andrew Kopp, and Ben Sherratt have all looked great. Curious to hear your thoughts. Let's go Red Wings, and keep up the great work. Thank you for the support. I know the Red Wings' first 2 games of the season weren't against the strongest of opponents, obviously opening the season against Montreal and then playing the Devils, but currently sitting at 2-0. I'm a happy Red Wings fan. A lot of positives, and a lot of the new players look great. I think obviously Ville Husso, he literally couldn't have done better in the 1 game he played, getting a shutout in his Red Wings debut. Sherratt, Perron, and Kubalik all already have their first goal as a Red Wing. Olli Maatta too, he's been a guy that I think has settled in really nicely, looked good through 2 games. But the one player I want to talk about, and it's not an offseason addition or anything, it's former 6th round pick from 2019, Elmer Soderblom, a surprise making the team out of training camp and preseason. He's on the 3rd line with Rasmussen and Sundqvist, which is a massive line. They're nicknamed the Redwood line already, and I know it's only been 2 games against pretty weak opponents, but I think Elmer Soderblom is going to stick, man. I think he's going to stay up for the entire season. I don't see any reason to tinker with that line whatsoever, because I honestly think they've been Detroit's best and most effective line through 2 games so far. Their cycle game is dominant. Soderblom actually scored the Red Wings' first goal of the season, which ended up being the game-winning goal against the Montreal Canadiens Game 1. The thing that's really stood out to me about Soderblom watching him through the first 2 games, just just how calm he is out there, doesn't try to do too much. He plays his game, which for a big guy is still kind of a finesse style. He likes to use his hands. He likes to, pull the puck through his own legs, and he's able to pull moves like that off. We've already seen his incredibly long reach be really effective on, back checking and forechecking. He really looks like he belongs. He's getting time on that second power play unit as well. So if he can give Detroit like a 15-goal rookie season, that just adds a whole other element to this team. The next question we have comes from Marcus Hunt, who says, with Vegas' start of the season so far, is it safe to say last season was a fluke and the true cup contending Vegas team is back? And thank you for the support. I feel like a lot of people just don't realize that last season Vegas didn't just play horribly and miss the playoffs. They had so many injuries to their top guys basically all season long. Jack Eichel, they made that trade and he was still trying to settle in when he came back. They had a really unlucky year and they were still in the hunt for the playoffs. It's not like they were one of the worst teams in the league. They were in the wild card race down the stretch. I feel like a lot of people forgot just how stacked this team is when they're healthy in terms of forwards and defense. Obviously, you're still going to have the people out there that question the goaltending, but so far through 3 games, it's looked great. Logan Thompson has been really good. Vegas is a perfect 3-0 at the moment, and they haven't just squeaked by and won those games. They've looked fantastic in all 3 of those games. So I know it's early and it might be a little bit of an overreaction, but I do really believe that Vegas is, back to being one of the contending teams in the Western Conference, especially if Logan Thompson is going to give them this kind of goaltending all season long. Moving along now, the next question we have comes from Pasta Boy, who says, what are your thoughts on some people saying Sidney Crosby is washed in 2 games played so far? He already leads the NHL with 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points. If he plays all 82 this year, could we possibly see him hit 100 points for the first time in years? To answer the last part of your question, if he plays all 82, yes, I definitely think he's capable of putting up 100 points. Crosby's just one of those guys, he's a generational talent. I think for as long as he wants to play, he's going to be a very effective player. This isn't a player that I feel like is going to have to retire one day just because he's not good enough. I think, all the way up until his last season, whenever that may be, if he's in his, 40s, 42, 43, he's probably still going to be good. He's certainly not washed. He's still one of the absolute best players on the planet. And let me just say, the Penguins look fantastic. I know one of their games was a blowout win against Arizona, and they kind of racked up the points in that game individually, but still, they look unreal. This next question is a little bit of a different one, doesn't have anything to do with the new season, but Stefan asks, have you ever thought of doing a franchise mode series on your channel with the new NHL game mode? It could be fun. So I actually have had a couple cracks, over the past couple years of starting a gaming channel, and I think it all just comes down to I'm not as passionate about it as this, and I don't feel like committing the time to something like that when I could be committing that time to this channel and making content for this channel. So that's kind of the main reason why I haven't done something like that, or it hasn't, worked out when I tried to do something like that. And I do play a lot of the NHL games. I've been gaming the new one, but I feel like I would rather just, kind of chill and relax and play games with my friends and not really have to worry about creating content for it, if that makes sense. Next up from Senator Sal, based on how the Flyers played the past 2 games, can they stay continuous or will they eventually fall to the bottom of the league? So yeah, the Philadelphia Flyers, one of the stories of the, first week of the season. They are currently a perfect 2-0. John Tortorella has that team absolutely working their behinds off early on in the season, which, we all expected. Every team is going to be a tough out with John Tortorella as their head coach, but I find it hard to believe they're going to be able to keep this up. I do feel like eventually they are going to fall to the bottom 10 teams of the league. Just look at that roster, man. I just really don't think it's sustainable. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to punch you in the mouth, forecheck relentlessly, finish every check, and be a tough team to play against, but that kind of style can only get you so far. Obviously, the NHL in this day and age in 2022, it's a skilled game, but in the end, I definitely do expect Philadelphia to come down to earth, probably sooner rather than later as well. I don't think this is going to, keep up for much longer, but it is nice to see them not just roll over to start the season. Everyone thought they were going to be an absolute joke, and things could definitely still end up being that way, but like I said, it is nice to see them putting up a fight out of the gate. The next question we have comes from No Defense, who says, are the Sharks messing up the rebuild? We're 0-4-0 and sent our young prospects to the minors when I personally think a guy like Bordelot in particular would benefit more from playing in the NHL. We're not meant to be winning games, so I think we should be developing the young guys through the NHL experience. Thoughts? So I know a lot of people don't like tanking, but I do genuinely think San Jose should try and be as bad as possible this year, especially, in a draft where Connor Bedard is going to be available, and then if you don't get Bedard, there's going to be a guy like Matvei Michkov at number 2. Obviously, both of those guys have all the potential in the world to be franchise-altering players, and when it comes to the Sharks and, having guys like Eklund and Bordelot in the minors, I honestly feel like that's not a bad idea, because I think if you have them in the NHL, that actually makes the team better, and I don't think they want to be, already 0-4, 4 regulation losses already when some teams have only played 1 game up until this point. They look real bad, and I feel like sometimes, having top prospects prospects, having top young players playing on a team that is that bad, that could have a negative effect on their development. So I honestly don't think a year in the American Hockey League will hurt either of those guys. I think they may even be better off for it. Are guys like Borderlow and Eklund, who we're focusing on here, good enough to play in the NHL right now? Would they look at a place? Probably not. I think they do just fine, but I don't think San Jose is necessarily messing up their rebuild by having, those guys in the AHL and kind of playing the slow game, playing it safe a little bit. Next up, this question comes from Nicholas Spears, who says, is Zadina being mismanaged, not playing in either of the first two games? So yeah, for those of you who don't know, Zadina made the opening night roster, but he was a healthy scratch so far through the first two games of the season, and it was a little bit of a surprise because I actually think Zadina looked really good in the preseason. Him and Michael Rasmussen I thought were two real standouts in the preseason for the Red Wings, but the reality of the situation right now is Detroit has a lot of NHL caliber wingers, like Adam Ernie, who is a guy that I think Zadina probably should be in the lineup over. Had a really good preseason, and he did earn the right to be in the lineup on opening night, I think. Ultimately, I don't want to say he's being mismanaged. Yeah, you want him in the lineup, you want him getting reps, you want him to, work towards a breakout season, but he's going to get an opportunity to play. Like, he's probably going to be in the lineup tonight against the Kings. Bertuzzi blocked a shot with, it looked like his wrist against the Devils. He left that game and did not return. Wouldn't be surprised if he broke something in his hand or something along the lines of that and missed like a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two. So I definitely think Zadina is going to get an opportunity to play as soon as tonight, likely in a top 6 role with Bertuzzi going down. I could honestly see him just plugging in on that top line, so it's just a matter of seizing that opportunity when he gets it, taking it and running with it. I really do still believe there's a quality middle 6 winger there in Filip Zadina. It's just a matter of him breaking out and finding that. Is it ever going to happen? Who knows, but I like to think it will. The next question we have comes from Chase, who says, even though we're at the start of the NHL season, should some teams be worried with how they've started off? For example, Oilers, Canucks, Wild, etc. And also, I really appreciate the support. There definitely is some teams that I think should probably be concerned. The Vancouver Canucks have looked awful. JT Miller especially hasn't looked good, which isn't a good sign. They inked him to that long-term contract extension worth a lot of money that hasn't even kicked in yet. It doesn't even kick in until next season. We've seen the Vancouver Canucks get off to an awful start last season, and ultimately they dug themselves into a hole that was just too deep to get out of. I would be a little bit concerned right now that they may do that again this year. Another team that you didn't even mention in your examples there that I would be a little bit concerned about, the New Jersey Devils, man. They have not looked good. They lost their season opener against the Philadelphia Flyers, and then they lost their home opener in Game 2 against the Red Wings. Both of those games had a final score of 5-2, obviously the Devils being 2 in both of those cases, and in their home opener against the Red Wings, there was fire Lindy Ruff chants already in Game 2 in their home opener. That is not a good sign. I think the fans are getting a little impatient with this team. This is a year they're supposed to take a real big step, and it just doesn't look like that's going to happen yet. Obviously, it is still really early. It's overreacting a little bit, but my concern with this team heading into the year was goaltending, and that's been their biggest problem so far through 2 games. As a Red Wings fan, I will say they were the better team against Detroit. They generated more scoring chances, outshot them heavily, more time on attack, more high danger chances. They were the better team. They just couldn't get a save when it mattered most. So those are definitely a couple of teams where if I was a fan of them, I wouldn't be, in full-on panic mode just yet, but obviously would be pretty concerned just based off of how last season went for both of those teams as well. And now for the final question of today's episode, wanted to keep this one around the 15-minute mark, so I think we're on pace for that. This one comes from Joe, who says, the Bruins have looked good so far without Marchand and McAvoy, but we're only a few games in. Do you think they will be able to maintain the success, or will their absence prevent that from happening? And of course, really appreciate the kind words and the support. So heading into the season, my whole thing with Boston was, are they just going to be able to, stay afloat as they wait for guys like Marchand, Grzelcyk, and McAvoy to come back from injury around, November, December? Are they going to be able to remain in the playoff hunt, during that span, not dig themselves too deep of a hole? And I know it's only 2 games, but they've looked really good, and it looks like they're going to be able to do that. The depth scoring has been fantastic for them so far to start the season. In just 2 games, 10 players on the Boston Bruins have already tucked their first goal of the season. Krejci, Pasternak looked dynamic as ever, and also, one of those games was against the Arizona Coyotes, but it does appear as though the Boston Bruins are going to be just fine. If they keep, scoring by committee like this, they're going to be a really tough team to beat. So that is going to wrap up the very first Ask Me Anything episode of the 2022-23 NHL season. I really enjoyed this one. Again, thank you so much to everyone who left a comment on the post, even the ones that didn't get featured. You guys make this series so much fun for me to do. Again, look out for this every Monday, so I would say keep an eye on my community tab around every weekend, like Saturday, Sunday. I'll probably put the post up. I hope you guys are enjoying the brand new NHL season. season as much as I'm excited to talk hockey with you guys all year long. So if you enjoyed this video and you're excited for what's to come, please be sure to hit that like button. That is the best way to show your support. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all soon.